The Players Club sold fantasy, desire, and fast money. But behind the scenes were lives spiraling into addiction, violence, broken bodies, and graves far too early. By 2026, the truth is impossible to ignore. The cast paid a price no one warned them about. Ice Cube as Reggie, director. Ice Cube was born on June 15, 1969, in Los Angeles, California. He was 29 years old when The Players Club was released in 1998, appearing on screen as Reggie while also serving as the film's director, writer, and creative force behind the project. By the late 1990s, Ice Cube was already a cultural heavyweight. After redefining West Coast hip-hop with NWA and launching a successful acting career in Boys in the Hood, 1991, and Friday, 1995, he used The Players Club as a bold attempt to tell a black female-centered story from inside a male-dominated industry. Critics accused the film of exploiting women while pretending to empower them, a contradiction that followed Cube for years. As his fame expanded, Cube's marriage to Kimberly Woodruff endured long stretches of distance and pressure created by relentless touring, filmmaking, and business expansion. While he avoided the public implosions that destroyed many peers, the emotional cost of being constantly visible yet perpetually scrutinized shaped his creative evolution. Films like Barbershop, 2002, and Are We There Yet, 2005, marked a deliberate pivot towards safer, family-friendly territory, less risky but also less raw, signaling a man choosing longevity over confrontation. By 2026, Ice Cube is 57 years old. He remains active as a producer, entrepreneur, and occasional performer, balancing music, film, and sports ventures. Lisa Raye McCoy as Diana, Diamond. Lisa Raye McCoy was born on September 23, 1967, in Chicago, Illinois. She was 31 years old when The Players Club premiered in 1998, cast as Diana, often remembered by fans as Diamond, the ambitious dancer whose beauty masked a fierce desire to control her own fate. The role turned Lisa Raye into an overnight symbol of sensual power, but it also locked her into a narrow image she struggled to escape. While she expanded her resume with projects like All of Us, 2003, public fascination increasingly shifted from her work to her personal life. Her early marriage to Tony Martin ended quietly, but the later union with Michael Missick, then premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, exploded publicly. Allegations of corruption and misconduct engulfed Missick's administration, and the marriage collapsed in 2008, dragging Lisa Raye into political scandal she did not create, yet could not escape. Tabloids framed her as both trophy and accomplice, erasing the nuance of her career and reducing her identity to a failed marriage. Financial strain, public embarrassment, and the emotional toll of being judged by association reshaped her priorities. Rather than chase Hollywood approval, she recalibrated, choosing selective roles, reality television, and entrepreneurship to reclaim autonomy. By 2026, Lisa Raye McCoy is 58 years old. She remains active in entertainment and business, speaking openly about self-worth, boundaries, and survival after public heartbreak. Bernie Mac as Dollar Bill. Bernie Mac, born on October 5, 1957, in Chicago, Illinois. He was 40 years old when The Players Club was released in 1998, appearing as Dollar Bill, a supporting role that nevertheless stole the spotlight with sheer force of personality. By the late 1990s, Bernie Mac was already known as a fearless stand-up comic, but The Players Club revealed something more dangerous: authority. Dollar Bill was loud, ruthless, unforgettable, and the performance marked a turning point. Shortly after, his career surged with Life, 1999, and Ocean's 11, 2001, followed by mainstream success in Bad Santa, 2003, and his own hit sitcom, The Bernie Mac Show, 2001 to 2006. Off-screen, however, Mac was fighting a battle that never ended. For over 2 decades, he lived with severe sarcoidosis, a chronic inflammatory disease that attacked his lungs, caused constant fatigue, and made every performance a physical risk. As fame intensified, so did the strain. Long shooting schedules, stand-up tours, and the burden of being a crossover star pushed his already fragile health to the edge. In July 2008, Mac was hospitalized at Northwestern Memorial Hospital in Chicago after developing pneumonia. He spent 3 weeks in intensive care, his body weakened by years of illness. What began as a treatable infection escalated rapidly. On the early morning of August 9, 2008, Bernie Mac suffered cardiac arrest and died, just weeks before his 51st birthday. Anthony Johnson as Lil Man. Born on February 1, 1966 in Compton, California, Anthony Johnson was 32 years old when the Players Club was released in 1998, appearing as Lil Man, a small but memorable role built on exaggerated humor and raw street energy. By the late 1990s, Johnson had become a familiar face in black comedy cinema. His expressive physicality and fearless delivery stood out in films like House Party, 1990, and later Friday, 1995, where laughter came easily and recognition followed quickly. Yet the same traits that made him unforgettable also confined him. As opportunities narrowed in the 2000s, Johnson drifted between stand-up, minor film appearances, and long periods away from the spotlight, struggling to regain the momentum that once felt automatic. Behind the scenes, his life grew increasingly unstable. While there were brief returns to public view through independent projects and reunion appearances, none provided the stability needed to reverse the slow decline. The laughter that once defined his career could no longer shield him from the physical toll accumulating quietly over years. Anthony Johnson was found unresponsive and died on September 6, 2021, at a hospital in Los Angeles County. He was 55 years old. His representative later confirmed that the cause of death was multiple organ failure. Dick Anthony Williams as Mr. Armstrong. Dick Anthony Williams was born on August 9, 1934, in Chicago, Illinois. He was 64 years old when the Players Club was released in 1998, appearing as Mr. Armstrong, a stern authority figure whose presence carried quiet weight rather than spectacle. As a child, he contracted polio, a disease severe enough to confine him to an iron lung for nearly 4 years. For most children, it would have been a sentence of fear and isolation. Williams later described it differently. The hospital became a rare place of safety, where he was fed regularly and shielded from the instability of the outside world. During recovery, he discovered music, performing with the Williams Brothers Quartet, and gradually realized that his voice could carry him beyond illness. Through the 1970s and 1980s, Williams built a respected career playing figures of intelligence and moral authority in film and television, including Five on the Black Hand Side, 1973, and Mo Better Blues, 1990. His performances were never loud, but they were grounded, shaped by a man who understood vulnerability at a physical level. By the time he appeared in the Players Club, his screen presence felt earned, calm, firm, and quietly commanding, the authority of someone who had already fought for breath long before fighting for recognition. Dick Anthony Williams died on February 16, 2012, at Valley Presbyterian Hospital in Van Nuys, California, from cancer. He was 77 years old. Judianne Elder as Mrs. Armstrong. Born August 18, 1948, Judianne Elder came into the world in Cleveland, Ohio. She was 49 when the Players Club 1998 cast her as Mrs. Armstrong, the mother whose quiet disappointment and protective love framed Diana's choices. Long before that role, Elder's career was built on the kind of stage discipline. She became a founding member of the Tony Award-winning Negro Ensemble Company, then broke through with screen and TV work across the 1970s to 1990s, building a resume that kept her working even when Hollywood's attention moved on. In the early 90s, she landed a high-profile recurring turn on Murphy Brown as Dr. Barton, the obstetrician in the show's landmark single mother storyline. But her real battle wasn't career, it was survival. Elder is a breast cancer survivor, and she later became a former legislative ambassador for the American Cancer Society, turning a private fight into public advocacy. That kind of trauma changes how a person carries roles like Mrs. Armstrong. The fear under the anger, the love under the control. Around the same era, her marriage to playwright Lon Elder III ended in divorce. They married in 1969, divorced in 1994. A long chapter closing just before the Players Club opened another. By 2026, Judianne Elder is 78. She remains connected to acting and storytelling, still working, but with a legacy shaped as much by endurance and advocacy as by any single credit. Christelle Wilson as Ronnie. Born on March 28, 1971, Christelle Wilson came into the world in Atlanta, Georgia, United States. She was 27 years old when The Players Club was released in 1998, cast as Ronnie, one of the dancers whose hunger for survival felt painfully real rather than performative. Wilson's path to that role was already etched with hardship. Before Hollywood ever called, she lived on the edge of financial collapse, working as an exotic dancer in Atlanta simply to survive, while simultaneously holding a job as a legal secretary at a law firm. The contrast was brutal. Nights spent performing under neon lights, days buried in paperwork and professionalism. She later acknowledged that the role of Ronnie was not an act of imagination, but memory. After the Players Club became a cult success, Wilson found herself both visible and constrained. The industry saw her clearly, but only in one dimension. Offers followed that echoed the same world she had just fought to escape, reinforcing a cycle many actresses from the film would come to recognize. Appearances in projects like Lockdown 2000 kept her working, yet never delivered the breakthrough that might have rewritten her narrative. Now in 2026, Christelle Wilson is 55 years old. She lives largely outside the Hollywood spotlight, her legacy tied to a performance that blurred the line between fiction and reality. Charlie Murphy as Brooklyn. Born on July 12, 1959. Charlie Murphy grew up in Brooklyn, New York, carrying a sharp wit forged by street life and responsibility at an early age. He was 38 years old when the Players Club arrived in 1998, appearing briefly yet memorably in a cameo that hinted at a comic voice still waiting to be fully heard. For much of his adult life, Charlie lived in the long shadow of his younger brother, Eddie Murphy. While Eddie ascended to global superstardom, Charlie drifted through supporting roles and behind-the-scenes writing, respected but rarely celebrated. Films like Harlem Nights, 1989, kept him visible, yet validation remained elusive. The frustration hardened him, sharpening a style rooted in brutal honesty rather than polish. It wasn't until the mid-2000s, with his explosive storytelling on Chappelle's Show, that the industry finally recognized what had been there all along. A master narrator turning lived chaos into truth-laced comedy. Years of grinding work, travel, and delayed recognition took a physical toll. Even as new opportunities opened, stand-up tours, acting roles, writing, his health quietly deteriorated. Charlie kept the struggle private, continuing to work while undergoing treatment, refusing to let illness define his public image. Charlie Murphy died on April 12, 2017, in New York City, from leukemia. He was 57 years old. Faizon Love as Peters. Faizon Love, born June 14, 1968, in Santiago de Cuba, was raised in the United States in a strict military household. He was 30 years old when the Players Club was released in 1998, playing Peters, a loud, reckless presence whose humor leaned dangerously close to menace. By the late 1990s, Love was emerging as one of the most recognizable comic-side characters in black cinema. His breakthrough in Friday, 1995, established a signature style, boisterous, physical, unapologetically crude, that audiences remembered instantly. The Players Club reinforced that image, but it also quietly sealed his fate. Roles in Elf, 2003, and Couples Retreat, 2009, kept him visible, yet always in variations of the same archetype. The out-of-control loudmouth, funny but disposable. Love's off-screen life began bleeding into public view through a series of legal troubles and arrests, including assault allegations and disorderly conduct incidents in the 2000s. The line between the characters he played and the behavior the media attributed to him grew uncomfortably thin, trapping him inside a persona he could no longer outrun. Comedy, once a shield, became part of the accusation. By 2026, Faizon Love is 58 years old. He continues to perform stand-up and appears sporadically in film and television, his career defined less by collapse than by stagnation. Terrence Howard as KC. Born on March 11, 1969, Terrence Howard came from Chicago, Illinois, USA. He was 29 years old when the Players Club premiered in 1998, appearing as KC, a sharp-edged, controlling figure whose menace felt disturbingly grounded in reality. Howard's rise after the Players Club was swift and undeniable. In the early 2000s, his performances in Crash, 2004, and Hustle and Flow, 2005, revealed remarkable emotional range, culminating in an Academy Award nomination that briefly positioned him as one of Hollywood's most powerful dramatic actors. But as his reputation grew, so did reports of instability behind the scenes. Multiple allegations of domestic violence surfaced across different relationships, painting a pattern rather than isolated incidents. Earlier still, Howard had been accused of assaulting a Continental Airlines flight attendant, an episode that hinted at impulse control issues long before fame amplified their consequences. In 2011, he publicly admitted to having struck his then-wife, later attempting to minimize the incident, an explanation that only deepened public backlash. As legal troubles and erratic public statements accumulated, Howard's career momentum fractured. Even major franchises were affected. His exit from the Iron Man series after the first film marked the moment when reliability eclipsed talent in casting decisions. By 2026, Terrence Howard is 57 years old. He remains active in music, independent projects, and occasional acting roles, but his legacy is permanently divided. They danced for survival. Fame followed, but so did illness, lawsuits, and silence. The Players Club didn't end in 1998. For many, the real story started there. Stay with us and tell us which life shocked you the most.